Hello, everyone. Trust your well and your families. This is Leadership Talk with Adegoke, episode 95. Yes, episode 95. Today, we're going to be looking at leadership and Japa. Leadership and Japa. What is Japa? Japa is actually a Nigerian terminology, a Nigerian word, particularly from the Yoruba tribe, which means to flee from, to run away from. Yes, Japa. Japa syndrome. It's actually a movement, and it's been going on for almost 2 years now. And basically, it's a situation where the youth, they're looking for greener pastures, better opportunities globally. And it's led to quite a number of young Nigerians traveling abroad to countries like the US, the UK, most especially for greener pastures, Australia, and basically looking for greener pastures, as I said. But this Japa is not something new. It's something that has been on for many years. Even in the early 60s, you found that quite a number of Nigerians, they traveled abroad, the first generation of Nigerians to study, and they got scholarships and so on and so forth. And they were able to return back to base. So Japa now in 2021-22, which has been quite a large number of young men and women looking for greener pastures. Like I said, it's not a new thing, but it's also important for leaders to realize that even now it's also affecting you know human resource. As leaders, what can you do to cope with the situation where most of your staff are traveling abroad and handing in their resignation letters? There isn't really much you can do because you can only try and adapt because it's a trend, and the youth are looking for opportunities, they're looking for exposure, they're looking for the right environment, so that they can improve their skills. They can also improve in terms of their net worth, but it must be done properly because it's not every Japa that is appropriate. Um, the grass is always greener on the other side, but it's always good to get some perspective that would help to give clarity to whatever we're doing, even uh, as followers, as leaders. And I just want to throw in just a few things just to help those that might have jackpot or those that might be in the process, because it's always good to have some counsel. Now, when you look at Japa, to run from, to flee from, what are we fleeing from? We're fleeing from maybe a situation where you want to make sure that you have a better life. But having said that, there are certain things that you must consider. Anyone that wants to the Japa, situation, if you want to flee from, there's certain things that you need to consider. First of all, is it appropriate for you to flee, or to run away from? Because it's not everything that always seems right that is right. Um, I'm a person of faith. I remember in the scripture, God said to Isaac, he said, don't go down to Egypt. Uh, there's always an appropriate time. But are you led, or you're just following the trend? If you want to japa like every other person, are you just following the trend? Because I realize that there's some people that would, for example, take a loan and, decide to go and study a program, maybe like an MSc management, and incur thousands of pounds. But that's not actually what they want to study. They find that by the time they finish those courses, they're not able to get a job. And instead of having an improvement in their finances, it puts them in a very challenging situation. So the first thing to do is to do a lot of research. research as to what you want to do when you travel abroad. What courses do you want to do? And it's very important. Don't just go and do a course that everybody's doing. Do a course that would help, to give clarity, a course that will help to also give you some semblance of, being an expert. So you need to prepare yourself. Number one, if you want to japa, you need to manage yourself, prepare yourself mentally. Will you be able to survive in that environment? Do you have a better job that you have right now? Some people just give up a better job and travel abroad, not knowing that, where they're running to. The options are sometimes it could be very narrow. And so if you're a manager in, for example, in a multinational, and you sell everything that you have and decide to japa, it might be a bit challenging, to survive in that environment. So it's not every japa that is appropriate. Manage yourself, get the right information, get into spaces where you can, it's always good to ask questions. It's always good to ask questions. There's a saying that if you ask questions, you will never miss the way. There's some people, when they travel abroad, they grad abroad, the first thing that shocks them is culture. Culture, when you speak English language, and obviously there's an accent that you have. Okay, so when you enter such environments and people begin to say, sorry, we can't hear what you're saying, then also another thing that also happens is the weather. The weather can be very hostile, particularly if it was a first timer, for somebody that is traveling for the first time, So, and all these things is important to ask questions. How can I cope in the weather? Then another thing that also happens is, what are you going to be doing in terms of earning? For example, if you're going to school, you're allowed to work for 20 hours a week. How are you going to pay your bills? You need to plan forward. So when it comes to japa, it's not something that one should just do haphazardly. You need to count your cost. Even the Bible says a man that wants to build a house should count the cost. So it's very important. I said manage yourself, number one. Number two, acquire skills. There's no skill that's a waste, particularly in the IT space. You find that there's some people who want to study in the UK, and or whether it's in the US, and they go there and they don't have IT skills. They're not savvy, IT wise. And so you find yourself in a situation where when you get there, you need basic IT skills. It's not like an environment where you say, okay, I'm not savvy on the computer. Whatever skills you can learn, it could be data analytics, it could be there's some high in demand jobs. Even if you type it on Google right now, those jobs, so you have a strategy as to when you're traveling to put yourself in such an environment where there's in demand jobs. Those can be done on the internet. What jobs are the jobs that you can easily fit in? Anyone can study an MBA. There's no point in spending so much money in acquiring a degree, and after that you spend maybe $20,000, and after finishing you're not able to get a job. It can be quite depressing. So there's some courses that if you even spend less, and even before you finish you get a job, which helps to give some clarity. So that's very important. So I said, number one, manage yourself. Number two, acquire skills. Very important. Acquire skills. Then number three, build strong relationships even back home. One of the things that happens when you travel abroad is that there comes that point where you are lonely. It's not a place where you just enter people's houses and you knock on the door and and just come in and say, oh, I'm hungry, and the door will be open to you. It can be very lonely being abroad. And so one of the the ways that you can overcome that is to also make sure when you're traveling or when you're japaing, as the case may be, still maintain contacts either in your place of previous employment, and also with your community, maybe your friends, with your network, with your alumni. Don't just say, okay, because you've traveled abroad, you want to abandon your friends, you want to abandon your networks. It doesn't work like that, because you would eventually need them. You're in a foreign place where it's not everyone that is able to accommodate you immediately. And so you might have situations where you feel lonely. And so it's important to circle back to the community that you have. Just make yourself open. Don't close yourself up, and don't say, oh, I don't want to, relate with my friends or my church family back home. Then one of the things that also happens is that if you are somebody that maybe a spiritually inclined person, sometimes, because everywhere might be far apart, to travel and to take transport to church might be a challenge. And even being online, online sometimes it could be good, but sometimes also there's also the negative side, because we're social animals, and we want to relate with people. So as I said, number one, manage yourself. Number two, acquire skills. Number three, build relationships. Then number four, set your goals. How long do you want to be abroad? How long do you want to japa for? Sometimes you just have these plans and think that you're going to be there forever. But you see, the truth of the matter is that, when you get there, after a while, the euphoria of living abroad, of staying abroad, because most of these countries, they were developed by their citizens, whether it's Canada, whether it's the US, whether it's Australia, they were developed by their citizens. And so the truth of the matter is that you can never become a first class citizen, in most of these countries. So you must have a long term view of returning back to your country. Yeah. Because whether you're there for 10 or 15 years, as the case may be, there's nowhere like home. So begin to make those plans even before you leave your place of abode. So it's good to have that kind of perspective. Are you japaing because you just need the money? Because the money will come eventually, but the fulfillment comes in because there's opportunities will come, but there's something called a glass ceiling. You might get to a stage in your career that you are not able to go beyond that. So what happens? What happens? So you must have a mindset to return back home, eventually. So whether it's 5 years, whether it's 10 years, don't just japa for the fun of it and say, oh, no, I'm not coming back to my country. You find situations that some young men, women, when they go abroad, and find themselves in a better environment, they begin to speak negative things about the place where they left. No, be an ambassador, be somebody of value, speak positively about your country. No matter what happens, there's opportunities that would always emerge, as being an ambassador. But if you're a negative person, eventually, it's not going to work out that way, because usually what happens is, whether you're in the UK, you're in America, people will ask you, they will want to, when you're filling a form, they say, is it Nigerian, British, Nigerian, or African American? You always have to. So they identify you by where you come from. So you can't deny your roots. So it's very important for you to set goals. How long do you want to be abroad for? Is it 3 years? Is it 4 years? Is it 5 years? And very important. Then finally, when you want to japa, the japa is to flee from, but it's not to flee permanently. You must also have a mentor, have an accountability partner. One of the things that helped me when I got to the UK, I mean, mine was probably decades ago. One of the things that helped me was that I immediately got into the right environment. I got accountability partners, somebody that I could look up to, somebody that was already doing that which I wanted to achieve. So probably I was trying to do a master's. I got somebody that I could speak to, that could encourage me, that was excited, because sometimes the community or the friends that you keep could also become a deterrent. You can enter spaces and all of a sudden you lose the momentum. It's not about starting the school, because mind you, even while you japad, you start your masters, there's no guarantee that you finish. So you must get into the right places, the right environments, and watch the company that you keep, because so that you don't keep the bad, in terms, don't get the bad advice and the wrong counsel. So, like I said, it's not always green. The grass is not always green on the other side. So, mentorship is very important. Mentorship, get the right mentorship. Get leaders, either the people back home that you still communicate with, because whether you like it or not, you know, um, the opportunities are there, but you must be able to leverage on those opportunities. In the next series of this podcast, I'm going to be talking about global mobility, leadership and global mobility. That you can get to a stage in your career that you can become globally mobile. You don't have to be a resident in the UK or the US before you have relevance. You can be speaking from anywhere. You can even be in Nigeria, and this is the gig economy. You can be earning foreign currency from wherever you are. So it's not about staying in one place, but you've been having the relevant skills that can, touch lives, that can influence lives, that can impact lives. So in conclusion, when we look at leadership and Japa, the Japa syndrome, it's not just to, have the head mentality, but how are you going to make a difference? How are you going to touch lives? Why are you traveling? Why do you want to, relocate? Migration is something that would always happen anywhere in the world. Migration cannot be stopped. It's part of man is, nomadic in nature. But when you travel, what's the purpose of your traveling? Then number two, the skills. What skills are you going to, acquire, or use to improve yourself there? And it's important to know that, if you don't have the right mindset, the right attitude, if you jump to another country, the same wrong attitude that you have would also come up. So you must have the right attitude, right work ethic. You must be somebody that, has the right values. Then number three, which I mentioned, is build relationships. Be somebody that will build relationships. Be even back home. Don't burn bridges. Continue to build relationships so that eventually you might need those relationships. So, and number four, set goals. Set goals. Have a medium plan, short-term plan. So don't just go there and say, oh, I just want to japa, I want to be there, and that is it. No. At the end of the day, time, before you know it, 5 years is gone. So you must be able to account for that time. So if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Then number five, you must have a mentor. Get into the right communities, whether it's alumni, whether it's the right people to speak into your life. So I would like to say, finally, for me, Japa is not a bad thing. It's something that would always happen for every young person out there that might be listening to the replay. It's a good thing to improve your skills, to have the exposure abroad. The first generation of Nigerians that traveled abroad in the 60s, they got scholarships to return back home. Nigeria, whether it's Africa, the opportunities, I like to say that we mustn't give up. There's still a bright future for Nigeria, and we must be ambassadors wherever we are, and still look back towards, whether we're in diaspora, look for ways of adding value. Don't say that because you're already in diaspora, that's the end of it. Have a way of circling back, impacting, helping others, being a voice of hope. And this is another session of Leadership Talk with Adegoke. And please feel free to share this session on leadership and Japa. And I hope you benefited a great deal. And if you have any comments, feel free to drop in the chat. And thanks once again. So I wish you and your families a wonderful Christmas and merry, glorious 2023. So this is the 95th podcast of Leadership Talk with Adegoke. This series on leadership and Japa. Thanks. Have a wonderful day. Thanks. Great.